business is a legislative update from Attorney Rob Dodig.
Microphone on? I don't think your microphone's on. No.
No?
Yep.
Okay. To give you a quick update on legislation, and I mean quick, because I know you have a full agenda. I know at least four of you were in Tallahassee last week. So if you have any tidbits or information to offer us that I may not have, which is altogether possible, certainly feel free to chime in. We are currently halfway through session, a little bit more than that, maybe early into the third quarter for you football fans. And the score seems to be 0-0 at this point regarding education legislation. However, there may be forces that are getting ready to score against public education again. As you may know, the session closes on March 9th. Last day for committee meetings is February 27th. This is, of course, if the session is not extended, which has happened recently. We know that the budget proposals for the House and the Senate have been revealed. The House has an FTE increase of 1.5%. The Senate has an increase of 1.37%. Unfortunately, in the House, they have tied their budget to House Bill 7055, which we'll talk about here in a minute. I'm also going to talk briefly about some other bills that affect public education and may affect public education and impact public education. And then I want to briefly talk about the CRC, the Constitution Revision Commission, which is diligently working to put items on the ballot, and they have to be done with their work in May, for matters to be put on the ballot in November of 18. With the legislative session going on at the same time as the CRC, it's a lot to keep track of. And I know your organization, the FSBA, is trying to do a good job of that. I certainly have used their materials along with our lobbyist, Carol Green, and FADS and some other sources for most of this information. So with that, let's talk briefly about House Bill 7055. As you know, I have a whole notebook that contains the bill, 198 pages. It is this year's version of 7069 in some respects, which was a train bill that you have authorized the lawsuit and were a plaintiff in a lawsuit on behalf of along with other districts regarding that. This bill does contain certain things that are somewhat advantageous for the school district in some respects. The capital millage seems to be watered down a little bit, and some other aspects that might be helpful. The Hope Scholarship is the first provision that I wanted to bring to light, which is a provision that would permit individuals, parents of students who allege bullying in their public school, to take for lack of a better word, a voucher, and use that at a private institution, essentially up to the FTE amount for that student. The obvious, how is this going to be funded, is a big issue. The current funding mechanism is on sale of automobiles, up to $105 of the tax for the sale of an automobile. A purchaser of an automobile will be able to sign off and allow that tax to go to this program, and the buyer will receive a tax credit. That was highly debated last week up in the legislature, and this bill 7055 has passed the entire House, so it is waiting Senate action. The inside information, and probably information that's not so inside, is that the Senate will not act on the current bill the way it is currently constituted. They would like to take up the individual issues one at a time through committee without much time to do that, and decide which portions of the bill they would like to pass or not. I know, Ms. Patrica, you may have some more information about that. I think in a conversation with you, and if you wish to share that, that's up to you. Obviously, the concern for us is that there are matters in that bill that Hope scholarships. There is a provision regarding reading scholarships for 3rd through 5th graders, for students who receive a 1 or a 2 on the state exam, can take a scholarship for reading and get tutoring services with that money. There is a portion of the bill that talks about superintendents such as Dr. Atkins that are appointed cannot lobby for up to 2 years after serving as a superintendent, even though they're not elected. I'm just going to run through some of these provisions regarding school board member travel expenses, that travel expenses would require prior approval, believe it or not, at a board meeting. That would have to be brought in front of the public if you were to travel out of county as a board member. There are limits on school board members' salaries, which would make them commensurate with the district's starting teacher salary. There is a provision regarding charter schools, a significant provision which would allow charters to have their initial term of a charter expanded to 5 years instead of 3. There is a significant provision that would concern probably most of us lawyers, that the burden for terminating a charter would be clear and convincing evidence now instead of a preponderance of the evidence, which is a higher standard. And all of those cases would go to an administrative law judge with the Division of Administrative Hearings, who would have final order authority in those cases, so basically taking it out of the hands of the local school board. Some more provisions. I talked about the Hope Scholarship. The reading scholarships accounts, I've already referred to that for students who are suffering or struggling in reading in grades 3 through 5. There is a provision regarding security risk assessments, which must be conducted at each public school. There are provisions that would delete language that requires home education students to be responsible for the cost of instructional materials. And so a dual enrolled home ed student, we would have to take on the burden of paying for their instructional materials, the public school district, even though the parent has chose to homeschool their child. Audits would essentially be required across the board. There is a school district fiscal transparency provision, which would require a whole bunch of financial information to be put on our website. There are provisions regarding reading in the 300 lowest performing elementary schools, and that the additional hour per day for level 4 and 5 students would now be allowed to participate. It used to be just level 5. Summer reading camp teachers who teach reading would have to be certified or endorsed in reading. So that would eliminate a certain number of teachers from teaching in summer school, at least for the purposes of reading. There is some provisions regarding superintendents and hiring of personnel. They can't directly supervise one of their relatives, which, as far as I know, has never happened here. Qualifications for personnel, and the charter school capital outlay funding is the last thing I'll mention in 7055, which does delete the language specifying that a charter school capital outlay funding consists of the discretionary millage revenue, so which it would be a good development for us. However, there's a formula that if the charter school doesn't receive adequate funding, then the discretionary millage becomes part of the funding again. So it's better than it currently is, let's just put it that way, if I was to editorialize on that issue. So that's 7055 in brief. There's probably 30 other provisions in there that I didn't touch on because I just don't have time today. But I wanted to touch on some other bills. House Bill 79 is a public meetings bill, which indicates that a board may participate in fact-finding exercises or excursions. Like, for instance, if you wanted to go out and see the site for a new high school, you could do that without violating the public meetings law. That's currently now in the Government Accountability Committee, that bill. House Bill 887 regarding reading instruction. Some of these items are in 7055, but there's also independent bills, so it's a little bit difficult to keep track of, and this involves the teachers that provide reading interventions must be certified or endorsed in reading. I can't speak for HR, but we may have a difficult time already finding folks that are endorsed in reading. Well, this would require anybody giving reading instruction or reading interventions to be endorsed or certified in that subject area. School district accountability, there's a bill 1279 which would require this board to hire an internal auditor, mandatory, and that person would take on significant responsibility, and I think the current legislation says that they are responsible for all financial aspects of the school district regarding reviewing and auditing them. So that would be, have a big impact, although we do have an internal auditor still on our books here. We did have that position filled at one time. It's currently not being filled. It would permit the DOE Inspector General to investigate any allegations made by public officials or board members without question. That also includes the board member's salary provision for, it has to be equal or commensurate with starting teacher salary. This bill has a committee substitute that was filed, and it's going to have its first reading in the House. That's 1279. 194 is the bill that mirrors a provision in the Constitution Revision Commission to create term limits for board members. This bill would create term limits beginning on November 6th of 18. So those of you that have been elected already, it wouldn't apply. It would apply to those folks that would be elected and start on the board in November. That is currently in the Education Committee, that Senate Joint Resolution. Senate Bill 324 regarding impact fees. Collection of them could be no later than the issuance of a building permit, and the fees cannot be used to pay for debt unless certain conditions were met. That bill has passed 2 committees in the Senate and is in the Appropriations Committee in the House. Senate Bill 996 by Mayfield would require what I think is a laudable idea, schools to provide instruction in CPR to students and the use of defibrillators. This would take place in either PE classes or in some other curriculum in the school. That is in the full Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and unfortunately there's no committee assigned in the House. So I don't know what will happen with that legislation, but it could be very helpful. Senate Bill 118 is on the fast track. It's already been sent to the House in messages by the Senate. It is going to permit legislators at any time, without warning, without notice, to visit public schools, similar to the provision that was passed previously for school board members to be able to do that. So one of our local delegation or any legislator in the state could simply come to a school without warning and tell the principal they're there to see the school and tour around. That seems to be on the fast track to becoming law. Senate Bill 856 by Montford would amend high school graduation requirements to permit apprenticeships to be used for credits for the purposes of fine or performing arts, speech, and debate, and they could be used as electives. House Bill 63 is this year's restraint bill dealing with students with disabilities regarding seclusion and restraint. It's on the second reading in the House and has been assigned to 3 committees in the Senate. So really what's happening is one House might be further along, the Senate or the House, but the other one seems to not be very far along with a lot of this legislation. So there's a lot of work to be done to get together. Senate Bill 496 is the OSS bill, which was last year proposed, where every few years there would have to be a public hearing regarding a school district suspension procedures, which we would certainly welcome because we're doing very well in that respect in our district. Senate Bill 1056 is Senator Pasadomo's bill regarding computer coding instruction, that we would have to provide instruction in computer science to students, and that is in Senate Appropriations currently. House Bill 439 is also a public meetings and records provision or legislation, that would allow board members to meet with their attorneys in private to discuss imminent litigation. Currently, you can only meet in a session with your attorney if the litigation is pending. In other words, we've actually been sued or we're suing someone. This would permit a meeting if the litigation is imminent, which could be helpful for understanding certain litigation. That is in the House Government Accountability Committee, and House Bill 272 is the bill that we're all familiar with, which would require that referendums for sales tax and other types of taxes take place in a general election. So that is my update regarding legislation. Any questions, comments? No? Okay. Regarding the Constitution.
Just
yeah,
one,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
One quick
Oh, sorry.
Another one that we just want to keep an eye on, and that's Senate Bill 188, which is, it references transportation. It
no, I
could
had that.
potentially change the walking distance from 2 miles to 1.5, and that obviously would have a potential financial impact on the school district. So it just, and I guess it is also in the Appropriations Committee at the current time, and so it's one that we're keeping an eye on.
I actually have it here and talked to Mr. Cody about it yesterday, and it would be at a significant cost to the district to transport kids at 1.5 miles. So thank you, Dr. Atkins, for bringing that up. Okay, the CRC Proposal 4 is essentially the proposal that would get rid of what's called the Blaine Amendment, which prevents public taxpayer funding to going to private or parochial institutions. Proposal 33 is a provision that would require all superintendents to be appointed. Obviously wouldn't impact this district, but it would impact a whole bunch of other school districts in the state. Proposal 43 would also set term limits. Proposal 45 is would essentially, for those that are opposed to it, possibly create another way to create school districts, a sort of parallel type of districts in the state. 71 would allow another process to be used to approve charter schools in the state. Like where I was born and raised in New York, there is a process where the state approves charter schools. So it would possibly create that type of system. Mm-hmm. Proposal 93 would allow high-performing school districts, A's or B districts for a number of years, to become charter districts and get out from under regulations and things like that. So these are the 6 proposals that are essentially alive concerning education. They are all either on second reading or getting ready for third reading in front of the CRC. Traditionally, there's between 8 and 10 proposals in total on the ballot. So my prediction is maybe 1 or 2 of these make it to the ballot in November, but we will try to keep you updated. Any questions, concerns?
Bless you. I do have one question. Is the Hope Scholarship centered around bullying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there criteria laid out for how you determine whether?
There's a number of provisions that battery and harassment, and yes, they are defined in there. Okay. The thing that seems to be missing is there's no provision for determining whether it was actually bullying or not.
Right.
The allegation is made, principal does an investigation. After 14 days, you have to send a notice to the parent saying this scholarship is available to you. So, anything else?
Any other questions? I have a comment. I talked to Senator Passidomo with Carol Green, and she indicated that the Senate would not agree to 7055. I think, Kerr, you're going to come up later and talk about the union bill associated with all of this, and she specifically indicated there was no appetite for passage of that in the Senate. I asked her if we would be headed to special session again, and she did not preclude that as a possibility. I want to put the idea out there early with this board that we need to get started on our legislative priorities immediately at the end of session this year so that we can, like an army, get out and start talking to our local delegation about what our priorities are. Last year we did 2. I think we should double that and include in that changes that don't require money, like taking away teacher certification or changing the teacher certification process, making changes to state testing, that kind of stuff. Our bill is dead. Our ECHO bill is dead. It will not even make it to the governor's desk this year. And Dr. Atkins and I had a bit of a conversation about our approach to our state delegation and changes that need to be made at the state level. And the irony of House Bill 1 is that it does nothing about the bully, right? The bully gets to stay in the school,
right,
and the victim is the one who's moved.
Yeah.
To a system of schools that don't have the same level of accountability, private schools, Catholic schools, whatever, parochial schools, as public schools do. So it doesn't logically make any sense, but I feel like we are the schoolyard victims of the bullies that are the state delegation. And I believe that the only way that we stop being victims is to stop accepting our circumstances. We have repeatedly played nicely with our state delegation, and that has gotten us nowhere. That has gotten us 7069 and 7055, and the dubious distinction of being number 50 of 50 states for state funding in this country. And we are living the definition of insanity. We are not standing up for our students, and in that regard, we are failing our students. The facts are on our side. The facts are on our side. Much of the restrictions and the unfunded mandates that they hand down to us simply don't work. They don't work, and the facts prove that. And we've got to stand up for our kids, and we've got to get out there, and we've got to help the public to wake up and understand what's going on. And I believe that starts with our teachers, and that starts with our staff, because they're already invested in what's going on. 15% of the 15% of teachers that vote, do we know what the percentage is?
Yeah, it depends on the election, but usually it's in the teens, from what
Okay,
I've seen.
but 100% of them can identify something that's wrong with their working conditions. 100% of them can, and legitimately so. So they need to understand that they play a part in making the changes that we need to make, not just for them and their working conditions, but for the students that they serve. So I am committed to being more aggressive and outspoken in terms of the ways that our state has failed us, and working with them to help them understand the changes that we need to make here in Lee County. Those are my comments. Mr. Toiber.
Mr. Patrica, thank you. You know, I was at the Construction Advisory Committee, and I brought through, we talked about the legislative platform, and we talked about our sales tax initiative. And we talked about, you know, the motto change for change, and it really should be, after much talk, and actually one guy, you know, one member of our committee is actually on the news press board and said, you know, he's going to write an editorial, and I think it might have been in Sunday's paper, I'm not sure, but it's going to be soon, how our initiative's not going to pass. And he said the reason is because we don't get it to the level of the voter of today's world of what's in it for me. You know, we talk about the issues of, you know, whether we borrow or save money or what, but when the parent doesn't understand that, you know, not passing the referendum puts 40 kids in a classroom, or puts portables out there that the kid, you know, that they have to, their child will come home frustrated and upset because they're in a, you know, classroom. Our teachers, you know, all of our good teachers just won't stay. You know, they won't stay in a district that can't put enough seats to make it a good place to work. So they'll leave. So we'll have inferior, you know, only the teachers that can't go elsewhere or have got so much invested here that it's just not worth it to leave, that they stay. We're putting pressure on every one of our teachers in this type of thing. So, you know, our teachers do have a vested interest, but it doesn't seem that we still can't even get them registered. And so, you know, I brought through the thing, you know, the issue of, you know, do we incentivize them? And I talked about the jeans day. You know, people are paying $5 to wear jeans, you know, if we can do the thing, and I'll say it until this board tells me that we're not going to support it. But, you know, if we get, you know, every school that has 85% of registered teachers get to wear jeans every Friday until the next vote comes up to pass, and then it rolls until the next vote to pass. So, you know, if they want to keep it going, they stay registered for every election from here on out. And, you know, if you just stop and think about it, you know, you know, they're tying the FEFP to this bill, meaning that if this bill doesn't pass, public education is not funded. And that's the reason why the Senate won't do it, but the state House of Representatives, run by House Speaker Corcoran, is playing hardball. He wants to decimate public education, and he's trying to penalize the boards that we have to publicly, you know, they did this before when the board before Dr. Kuckel was actually on the board as in a minority vote, and then I came on the board to feel the pain, but the majority of this board thought they were clever going to the state of Tallahassee and made a public display about how poorly they were funded. It was accurate. It was factual. The numbers were on our side, just like you're saying now. The result of that, the state legislature, the House of Representatives, punished every school board in the state that were the only elected officials that had to publicly announce and set our own salaries. Well, we did the same process that we've always done. The FSBA comes out with a number that says this is how many students you have. Based upon this number, this is what your salary is. And so we would vote it in. Now, that was the way we were doing it. And I, tongue in cheek said, if we have to set our own salary, I say we set it at 1.2 million apiece. I said, let them vote us out of office. I said, one go around, you can kick me out of office. And of course I couldn't get support from my other board members. But my point is that, we had to every year, bring it up at a meeting, and that following day, it was on the front page of the New Press above the fold, and we had to put up with that type of humiliation until it died back down again. How much we're being paid, and is it enough, or is it not enough, and so on and so forth. And that went on for 5 years, before finally we had enough relationship with our legislators that we got up in Tallahassee and said, okay, we paid our dues, remove it. And so we did, for 5 years, we had to endure that until finally they said, okay, we'll take you off and treat you like every other elected official. So you're looking for that again. They're going to punish us. We filed a lawsuit for the last time for HB 7069. They're earmarking, they flat out said the people that are on that lawsuit, we have a target on our backs. So they're going to punish us every way they can. Now, they can't punish us sometimes directly. They can without our not restoring our capital. So they're punishing the entire school districts across the state. So that's the reason why some of these additives are, if we want to travel, we have to make it public. So more public comment can come in here and bash us for things that are so inconsequential and insignificant, and it's going to get approved, but it gives us that embarrassment factor. So those are some of the things you're seeing coming forward. That will not change. Representative Corcoran believes he has enough clout and he's enough of a bully in the State of House of Representatives that he can tell people this is how it's going to be, and do it or you're going to fail. And he did that with 7069, and he's going to do it with this next bill. So for us to say anything different, there's only two ways that are going to change it, is money or votes. And we don't have money, so we have to have votes. And if we don't have a method and a true plan on bringing 85% of our 13,000 people, if we had 13,000 people show up at the polls, we could take every one of our representatives and put them on notice, because that's enough of a vote count to remove every single one of them. And if you don't think that would change where their attention goes, then you're kidding yourselves. But until we do that, until we put this board makes an affirmative move on how to get more votes at the ticket booth, we're wasting our time. And all we're doing is, like you said, the difference of insanity, but you're actually not only are being insane, but you're asking for us to be punished with no recourse. So until we come up with a plan that actually puts voters in the booth, you're just gonna be punished.
And I second that.
Ms. Morgan?
So I've already talked to Dr. Atkins. We're going to do a workshop after session is over. So all I'm asking you to do, Steve and Chris and everybody else, if there's something you want to talk about at that workshop, Carol will be there, and we will talk about, our role vis-a-vis Carol, what our priorities are for the coming year, and what our relationship will be, how we will build or deconstruct or whatever that relationship. So if you just get your ideas to Susan or to Dr. Atkins, and we'll try to make sure that everything that everybody wants to see get covered is covered in that workshop.
And I'd like to ask Mr. Martin if he could just clearly give a legal opinion as to, and I think it's okay, but just give a clear legal opinion as to whether we can incentivize teachers to register and vote in the way that Mr. Toiber has suggested in anticipation of that meeting.
Certainly, taking actions to encourage their civic participation, there's no prohibition against that. Encouraging them to vote is fine. Encouraging them how to vote, of course,
Right.
would have limitations.
Right, okay. Dr. Atkins?
Well, and we also do have efforts underway already to do just that. Dr. Pruitt is working on, a plan to help us in terms of increasing the number of participants per school registered voters. And then the other thing that we can do is, obviously, we can help with working conditions and principles. Whether you're trying to help somebody with make a doctor's appointment or to complete their civic duty. There's things that we are able to do within our legal constraints that we can help facilitate the voting process for them. So we're doing all those things. And then the supervisor of elections, when we visited him, he had indicated, when I went over with Mrs. Morgan and Dr. Desenwars, a real desire also to reach out to our students and improve education at that level so that our students as well know that the importance of their civic responsibility and voting and participating in the democratic process. So that's just another avenue that we're encouraging people, because really that's part of what education is about. I mean, it's not just about reading and writing, but it's also about participating productively in a democratic society.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Fisher?
Okay, so recently I've had an opportunity to visit several schools and talk with SAC members, PTO members, and large numbers of staff. And it's true, most of our teaching staff, at least our instructional staff, are not registered to vote. So we talked a little bit about the privilege of using your voice as well as the responsibility. And I think that if, looking at the recent media coverage and news, we are not looking that good right now, and we're not looking strong, and we haven't been strong because, like Mr. Toiber said, we've allowed ourselves to take a second seat and try to keep it low key so that we would get some kind of achievement with our legislative priorities, which we have not. I don't agree that we need to get more aggressive or engage more in that, in the back and forth. I think we need to pick a focus and stay with that. We need to have a plan of action. We need to know what it is that we're doing. Now, one of our goals is to improve the public perception of the school board. And we felt like we were making progress with that. But in recent weeks, that has kind of fallen down because of the back and forth, which really has served us no purpose, has not changed the mind, in fact, more inflamed our delegation and the people in Tallahassee. So I think we're putting our energies down the wrong path. And I think that we need to look at what exactly our plan should be. What do we want? We want to make our district strong. We want to be able to afford to keep our schools. And the reality is, although there's this movement to disintegrate public schools, 90% of the people send their kids to public schools. And so we have got a captive audience. If we can get the word to them, and I'm going to back up now because when I spoke to a lot of our educators, they're like deer in the headlights. They don't even know anything about the budget or the money. And when we show them the slide, they're like, wow, we didn't know that. They need to know. They have a right to know. I said, you guys are property-owning taxpayers. How many of you own a house here? And most of the hands went up. I said, well, then why aren't you using your voice? Well, we're not used to that because that's not the environment that we've created for our staff. So I think that when you actually look at the people and hear what they have to say, I recognize that we have some educating to do, and they need to feel valued and included in this decision-making process. And again, like I said at the last board meeting, the organizational chart, smack at the top is the public. We represent the public. In order to do that, we need to be listening to what they think and what their ideas are. And when they're operating on inadequate information and they don't have the facts, we can't expect them to tell us what they want. So I think we really need to focus our energies and our efforts on doing that communication, building those relationships, and not engaging in a back and forth with the other local governments at this point. That's just my opinion.
The only thing I'll say is the feedback that I've gotten has been the opposite. People are wondering what our state delegation has against children in public education. That's been the outcry I've heard. While they really don't support kids, that's what people who are talking to me are saying when they're reading what's happening in the newspaper. So just the feedback I'm getting is is a little bit different. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Attorney Dodig.
Chris?
Just the other thing in terms of feedback, I do think that when facts are misrepresented, I do believe it is, I felt when the board represented the facts as accurately as opposed to the misrepresentation that had taken place the week before, that's very important to do. And it may seem tit for tat, but no, that's correcting, correcting the facts. And I think that's important because the public needs to know the facts. And I think that our job, I think you all agree with this, or at least most of you, that we really do need to spend a lot of time educating folks as to what the current facts are, what the truth is, and if we're able to do that, we have a very compelling story to tell. But right now, that's just not out there, so we have our work cut out for us.
We do.
Thank you. Next up is instructional materials adoption, science textbook. Dr. Creel, Ms. Fainer, Mrs. Houchin, Mrs. Zellers, and Mr. Stratton.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Atkins. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to share about our science textbook adoption process this year. We have 3 members on our team that are here to share that were actually sitting on the committee with other teachers, students, and community members. So we have Misty Neal, Vonaya Neal, and Heidi Brennan, and we also have Rob Stratton, who's really instrumental in leading the charge from the very beginning of working with our vendors, our state, and leads it all the way through to putting the textbooks and the resources in the hands of our students. And our teachers are always very excited about being able to review the opportunity to look at these materials and see if they see something that will spark and ignite that love of learning in their classrooms. So Rob?
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank everybody for their support of our teachers through this process. The process that we've led this year, it mirrors the processes in the past years in the fact that we make this, the adoption process completely transparent to the public. We open up starting in October. We have an event where the publishers are available to all community members, teachers, to review, ask materials, ask questions about those materials, and then in December, we gathered the committees. 103 committee members came together in the month of December, comprised of teachers, students, administrators, and community members. This year, we increased our students' participation at the middle school level. So we had several students who weighed in on why what they're looking for in instructional materials, and they lended their voice to that process as well. So what I want to do is introduce what materials were selected by level, and we're going to start with elementary. Elementary materials K to 5. McGraw-Hill was the publisher, and Heidi's going to talk about why the committee selected those materials.
Okay, you can hear me, all right?
It's got to be on the,
Microphone. We need the microphone on.
we do because for the recording purposes. Then.
They'll turn it on, I think. Yeah, we need the microphone on in the back. Try again.
How about now?
There you go.
Sibilance. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Heidi Brennan. I'm one of your elementary science PDLSs here at the district office, and just kind of discuss a little bit on why we chose McGraw-Hill. We had a set of non-negotiables. The first, of course, was alignment to our standards. There's some confusion out there because, as I'm sure you're aware, in 2016, the decision was made not to change the science standards here in Florida. We still have the next generation Sunshine State standards. But since NGSS is very close to NGSSS, there's been some confusion in the field into what we need to focus on. So again, we made sure it was aligned to our Florida state standards. Along with that, even though we didn't change the science standards, we have the Florida standards for mathematics, ELA, mathematical practices. Those are not represented right now in our current science textbook. For us, we had Nat Geo at the time. So we need to update those books so they're in alignment with our new Florida standards as well, so they comprise the course in its entirety. That's really important for us at elementary because we face a lot of challenges with time, and science sometimes gets pushed off to the side. So this particular program, McGraw-Hill, did a really good job of hiding the text complexity within it, so it'll make it easier for teachers to bring it into their literacy blocks and use that to support reading. It makes that time crunch a little bit easier. Another point that was really important to us was seeing the 5E model of inquiry. This came through with Roger Bybee back in the 1980s, research-based, very beneficial. A lot of the district trainings that we do here, as well as state trainings that push out to other districts, are surrounded around the 5E. The 5Es are engage, explore, explain, evaluate, and elaborate. And just that layout makes it easier for teachers to present the material. McGraw-Hill has partnered with Paige Keeley, who was the president of the National Science Teachers Association for many years. She's a renowned author with NSTA Press, and she has done several books called Uncovering Student Ideas in Science. Well, they partnered with her, and every single unit begins with one of those probes. So that'll help teachers understand the misconceptions and how to attack them, so to speak. Also, with supporting ELLs, it did a really good job in the teacher's edition, in the TE, laying out different strategies to help our varying levels of ELLs, those coming in that are unable to understand the language or write, and those that are developing. So that was important to us as well. Differentiation is throughout the program. Again, very easy for our teachers to understand through that teacher's edition. We also really liked the combination of the digital material when the students also still have the hard textbook in hand. That's something that we know our teachers wanted to have, and again, we need that for our literacy blocks. And then finally, another great thing about McGraw-Hill is it has, it doesn't separate our nature of science standards by themselves. It embeds it through the whole program, which is how it really should be, and secondary can attest to that. We're trying to build them up to that level. And the book gives great opportunities for a lot of speaking and listening standards to be heightened, as well as writing. So they're doing great, fun, engaging activities, but now they're writing about them afterwards and really becoming masters of that content. And also with time crunch being an issue, McGraw-Hill had fast track options, which were really spectacular because they might have cut certain things out, but it still hit the main pieces of content that our students need to have to be successful on the FSSA. And every time I think I'm done, I think of something else. They also have a test prep book, which we haven't had from publishers in the past, meaning that the questions that are within it are aligned to the format of the FSSA, the Florida Statewide Science Assessment. So that is also very important, and they were sneaky. They did a great job of spiraling in some of our 3rd and 4th grade annually assessed content to help those 5th grade teachers review in a timely manner. So, any questions on McGraw-Hill?
Any questions? What is your name again?
Heidi Brennan.
Heidi, what do you do for the district?
I am a Science PDLS, Professional Development Leadership Specialist.
Spend any time in the classroom?
Yes, I have. Yeah, and I recently just moved back. I worked for here 7 years and then went and worked for the Florida Department of Education for 4 years and then came back home.
Okay, well, you're awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Heidi attests to the amount of time our committee spend really reviewing those materials. The teachers really do take the time during the committee process to get to know the content.
Exactly right, and I have to commend Rob, because being on both district and state level committees, his process was spectacular and very thorough. And he's right, we had science lab teachers that were in the mix that did a great job of taking some of those units and practicing them out on their kids. And that really let them know if it was something that we should jump on board with. They did a great job.
Thank you. Okay. And Misty's going to talk about the middle school selection.
Hi, my name is Misty Neal Gooseby. I am also a professional development and leadership specialist for the district, and I work with secondary. So I'm going to speak on middle school for a little bit and then take questions, and then I'm also going to speak on high school. Like Heidi stated, some of the non-negotiables that we had also in middle school was the 5E engagement model, and we also had to look at our students' reading level coming in. Unlike with elementary, middle school, we have a separate block for science. So one of the things that both high school and middle school had to do was also look at our current science progression, because we just changed this year. So one of the focus for middle schools, what the committee looked at was, in previous years, we were in a comprehensive model where students got a little bit of every type of science each year. So teachers really didn't have to specialize in a science. They had to be a jack of all trades, so to speak, for science. And the students got a lot of science, but not really connected together each year. So last year when we looked at our science progression, we looked at ways to fix that so that we can improve our data. And in turn, that went from a comprehensive model to a subject-based model in middle school. So when we looked at textbook adoption, our focus was looking at how it laid out those subject matters for 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and then how that in turn aligned with our state standards. And so for middle school, we chose Pearson as the textbook adoption. The reason why we chose Pearson, again, was the same level of understanding that Heidi had with the 5E engagement models, making sure that we had enough support for our ELLs. In secondary, we start to see more of a gap with reading. So what we tried to do was make sure that whatever book we chose had multiple languages, because we're finding in our district, not only with our ELL students, not only are they Haitian, Creole, and Spanish, we have several different dialects of Spanish. So Pearson offered 103 different languages that the children can engage the text in their native language. Another thing, what we loved about Pearson was it had the ability to spiral down Lexile levels, so students coming in, the teachers could differentiate the reading level automatically based on, and the children could change their reading levels on the digital platform. We also just like with elementary, because that 8th grade test encompasses 6th and 7th grade standards, we wanted something that in the 8th grade year would also spiral back lessons and spiral back the things that they should have learned in 6th and 7th grade. So that was some of the things the reasons why. A thing that we found when we were in textbook, the adoption committee, we had middle school students there. And one of our top choices was not a platform that offered a hard copy or a consumable. And one of the things that the students gave us, which feedback was, they wanted something in their hands. They wanted something hard copy. They wanted to be able to write in their books. And with this adoption, Pearson offers consumables, which the students are able to write in. And for the life of the adoption, we get those consumables as part of that budget. So that's why we chose for middle school. Any questions on middle school? Yes.
So you had to drop, so your first choice didn't make it because it didn't have the consumables?
Yes, because when we talked to the students, and that was a really great thing about having the middle school students in the room, they voiced their opinion. And one of the things that they said was, we want a book. Because as teachers, we were looking at we're one-on-one technology and incorporating that digital component, but our students really spoke out about having a hard copy, and we listened, so we changed our #1 choice to fit and take into that student voice.
I have 2 children in middle school. To say that they voiced their opinion is an understatement. Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so high school is a different beast within itself. When we looked at our high school textbooks, we had to look at it from 2 different lenses. In high school, we have a kind of unique perspective, and we're looking at not only boosting our students' reading level, but we're looking at what are they going to leave and what are they going to do when they leave us. So at high school, we start to look at just beyond the classroom and look at post-secondary aspirations. So when we looked at textbooks, we kind of looked at it from reading levels for high school. So for high school, our level 1 and 2 readers, we know that they need more reading support. So we wanted to adopt a book that was very reading heavy, that helped them to build upon those skills that maybe they're deficient in, while also spiraling in science content. So for high school, for environmental science, we chose HMH, because HMH has this unique program where it spirals it down for the kids, but once the kids are reading it, it has these formative assessments already built in. So if a teacher were to assign a reading assignment based on that child's Lexile level, they would have those spiral backs in automatically to build in. So for environmental, we looked at our kids' reading level and trying to support them not only in science, but also their FSA reading, because we know that test is 70% informational text, and that informational text is social studies and science. So we saw the need for our science teachers to also be reading experts in their classroom. So that's why we chose the book for environmental for our level 1 and 2 readers. For biology, which are our on-level readers, we tried to look at not only if the kids are on level, what do we do for our 4s and 5s that already get it? And for that one, we chose McGraw-Hill because it had this really great component called Learn Smart, where it actually, as the students are learning, it questions them, and then it increases the rigor automatically based on their responses. So when we were looking at those reading levels, those are typically our kids that have that track where they're going to go right to college, our bright future scholars. So we wanted to give something to them that not only maintained their reading level, but spiraled up. So in high school, like I said, it's very unique. So those are our life sciences. And then with anatomy, because it is a class that most students that take it go on to college, our choice for that was based on how do we prepare them to take anatomy in a college level. Same thing with chemistry. Normally our chemistry kids are our on-level kids. So when we looked at our textbook adoption materials, we looked at what do the kids need for the next level. So after we get their reading at that level, how do we get them ready for college? How do we get them ready for trade school? How do we get them ready for the Army? So our textbooks were based on that. Any questions on high school? Thank you.
You're also awesome.
Thank you.
They are.
I understand a lot of what you said, but you're awesome.
Thank you. You want to go ahead and move forward? So the next slide just breaks out the estimated expenditure around this adoption, just for your information. Okay. And then that takes us to the final piece, and that's the public review process. So these materials have been available to the public since October online through the district's website. They continue to remain throughout this review process, through the public hearing, through the objection phase, and then to the final public hearing that concludes the selection and adoption of the materials. And do you have any questions for us around process or?
Ms. Fisher?
So with the public review access of the instructional materials, how many hits have we had on our website?
Excellent question. That is a question I will get you an answer for.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, as the liaison to the Curriculum Advisory Committee, they did the same presentation in their meeting, and I would say there was unanimous support, not necessarily for the materials, but people were really pleased with the process and therefore comfortable with the outcome. So the Curriculum Committee was all in.
Any other comments or questions? I'll say, I think the first time I met you was when I was a community member on a textbook adoption committee,
Yes.
right? And I, at that time, was blown away by the level of commitment by our teachers to choose the best materials for our students. And it's clear that you have a high level of understanding not just of the underlying materials, but what will serve our students best. I agree, Mr. Stratton, your process is fantastic. I remember listening to Mr. Torba last year when he went through the process and how excited he was. And really, the process, the part of being involved in that process was one of the things that made me excited and wanted me to become more involved in this district. So I commend you for the hard work that you do, and I'm very, very grateful that you're willing to give up your time to find what's best for our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Human Resources Finance Job Study, Dr. Pruitt, Ms. Millay, and Mr. Rothenberg. We don't have that. I skipped Miss Letcher, sorry. Ms. Letcher will give us a budget update with division priorities and budget timeline.
Thank you all very much, and I'm so happy to be here and talk about the budget. I wanted to talk about where our priorities are for next year, where we're moving forward in our timeline. As you know, the Vision 2020 is what drives our budget. That's the priorities that our departments use and our schools use when they are setting their budgets up and working forward. I did want to discuss some of the long-range goals that our departments have and where in our divisions and where we're going. As you can see in business services, one of our main goals is increasing efficiency, and there's a couple of ways that we're doing that. We're doing that in finance. They're working on a new EDI process, which is electronic invoicing. So what that does is the invoices come in electronically to us, and it uploads automatically into our system, and that keeps people from having to sit there and key the stuff into the system, which really will save a lot of time for our accounting clerks. Procurement's also working on a process called GovSpend. It's a website that they can go to. The website collects purchase orders from all kind of school districts, county governments, all kinds of things, loads them up. And so if we're looking for a specific item, if we're looking for tables that we're going to purchase, they can go in and type tables. They can go out and look at what vendors other people have used, how much they've paid for, which really saves them a lot of time for making phone calls to find out what other counties are doing, what vendors they're using, and things like that. They also can get quotes instead of calling for quotes. They can go out and type in that they're looking for a certain kind of table, and vendors can go in and give us online quotes, which helps and saves a lot of time for our procurement staff to not have to go out and do that individually and call around. We are also looking at refining our school allocations. So we're working with academic services, and we're looking at working on the equity index for the school. So what we're doing is we're tweaking our allocations so that we drive our resources to where the schools really need them and the programs they need and the things they need, and that's what we're trying to work with academic services and really refine that process so we can meet the school's needs and drive the resources where they're needed. Human resources, of course, is always working and trying to recruit the best people that we can and retain the really highly effective people that we want to be teaching our kids and working in our district. Academic services is focusing this year on professional development for our teachers and restructuring ESE and looking at the ESE program and seeing, what we might need to do differently or, what we're doing well. You have met with some of the divisions already and talked to them about what they're doing, and I think you've met with information systems and operations. I'm not even going to begin to understand what information systems is doing because, Trey's way above what I am. But they are working on a student information system, migrating the student information in. That is a 3-year venture, and we're in our first year of that right now, so they're working towards that. I believe you've also met with operations, and you know that we're working on the proximity, so we're looking at trying to have the students go to schools that are closer to them, not have the long bus rides, which will also save us money, which is always a good thing. And of course, we want to always have a safe trip for our students, but we want to make it efficient too. We're also looking at putting our resources into maintenance to make sure that we can maintain our schools the best way that we can and with the dollars that we can. While we're doing that, so the budget timeline we're going through, we've already done our projections for our schools and how many kids we think are going to show up. We work with district planning on that to come up with where we think we are, and we're working on school allocations. Yesterday, I'm very excited to say we had our first department meeting, and Trey's office and the Green Agile team has put together a new budget preparation system. It's very exciting. We used to send Excel spreadsheets out to departments. They would fill them in, send them back to us, and we would go back and forth. This is a new online system. It's like a dashboard system, and they go put their budgets in that way. The information then goes right to the chief. The chiefs can review them. They can right there decide if they want to move it forward, if they don't want to move it forward, if they want to make changes. Then they submit them to us, and we can go through the process, with the superintendent review and all the other reviews that are needed. What's really good about this is it's on time. So anytime a director can go in and see what's happening with their budget. They can see if something's been denied. They can see if it's still moving forward. They can ask the questions then. It's really good. It's not one that used to be we would at a certain time send something out and say, here's where your budget stands right now. So this is on time for them. We're really excited about that. And I think everybody else is going to love it. I think anybody who's been in there looking at it just really loves the system.
Yeah, just a couple words. You know, Kelly's much too humble in terms of her role in all of this. I was talking to Mr. Davis just this morning, and he went on and on about how helpful, you know, Kelly has been in the development, working with Agile Green in the development of this online system. And you know, so he says, you know, it really takes a subject matter expert to really be able to help the development team, you know, put this together. So Kelly was that person. And one of the things that's important here to note is that because the way the old system worked, you know, those updates, you never knew exactly which Excel document, if you were up to date or not. And sometimes you'd be in meetings and somebody would have the wrong form, and this eliminates all of that, and it puts it all online, you know. So I think this is fantastic, and I want to commend both Agile Green and Kelly and her team, because I think this is really a huge step forward.
I agree to 100%. And I have a great team in my office that worked on this too. It wasn't just me. They were in there and looking at it, providing the information. So it was really a good team effort. And the Agile Green team, if you've never met them, are wonderful to work with, and they were always asking good questions, and it was really a good experience. So I'm really excited about this. The rest of the timeline that I'm going to go through is just going to be real brief for you. The next process after the departments submit, they go to their chiefs, they'll do their review, then it will go to superintendent review and cabinet and go through that process. As we're doing that, I'll be briefing you monthly on different parts of the budget. If there's anything in particular that you would like to hear about or you're interested in, please let me know or let Dr. Atkins know. We'll make sure that that's included on the briefing so that we can keep you up to date on what we're doing. The next time that we'll bring the actual budget to you will be on June 26th. That will be the preliminary budget. That'll be the full preliminary budget that we're going to recommend moving forward. The rest of the time will be, you know, where we're at, and what's going on in different areas. On July 19th, the state will do their actual certification to us. So that's when we find out the millage rates that we're going to need to levy and the information from the board, which is from the state, which is really our second calculation. At that time, we have to do a real quick turnaround and get it advertised in the paper, which leaves a very short timeline for us to get that done so that we can hold our public hearing, which will be held on July 26th this year. July 31st, sorry. And then on September 11th will be our final public hearing. And in between the tentative and the final, basically the tentative is the budget, and then what happens is when we get between that time period, we have our final FY18 numbers, so that's when things will roll forward. Our actual fund balances will be in place, so when September comes, you're really approving the July 31st that came forward with really basically the new money and some estimates, and the final September is the actual budget with all the actual numbers, the way it stands at the end of the fiscal year. So that's what I have for you. If there's anything that any priorities that you all would like to see built into the budget that you haven't heard, please let me know or Dr. Atkins know so we can make sure that those get built into the budget as well.
You know, one thing I do have to just mention that, you know, these last year's budget, or actually this year's budget, as you all are aware, is actually available online, as are some of the previous years. And, you know, that's not information that a lot of our public know about. We were meeting with one county commissioner, for example, with Dr. Desamores was there with me, and he had made a request to get to our budget, but he said, well, I'm sure that will be a difficult item to ask for, and Dr. Desamores said, well, no, it's available right online. You can go look at that anytime you like. So remember, I know you all know this, but they get awarded every single year for best budget presentation. And if you haven't used that as a real resource, I would encourage you to do so. It's something that I can go to many, many times, and it has an abundance of information. So it's out there on the web, but also if you want a hard copy, you can let us know as well. So.
Great. Board members, any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds spectacular.
Thank you, Ms. Letcher. Next up, we have Human Resources Finance Job Study. Dr. Pruitt, Ms. Millay, and Mr. Rothenberg.
Good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, board members. Mr. Rothenberg and Ms. Millay and I are here to talk with you about some work coming out of the Compensation and Labor Relations Department. As you know, this department is a relatively new department, and we have been working diligently as part of this effort to revisit and go through all of our almost 900 job descriptions, some of which haven't been reviewed in over 20 years. I will say the last valiant effort was by Dr. Atkins when he was in this position. And then as you've heard me say many times about resources and level of service, he wasn't able to complete that work. And so we have taken that on and are working our way through. So in that vein, we have recently been working through the finance division with Susan and Dr. Desimore before she left, and Kelly to go through that division and have completed the majority of the work. Some few minor things will come through the budget process that we were still working through, but at the request of Dr. Desimore, we wanted to kind of move forward with the work that had been completed so far. So in the package that I have here for the briefing, you have your executive summary relative to the changes and the revisions of the job descriptions that we revised, and then the addition of some new job descriptions. And this is a result of a several month-long process that the finance division went through in order to come to this point for this to move forward for you at the February 27th meeting. So at this time, I'll answer any questions you may have.
No questions? Comments? I go to training for FSBA and I meet other school board members. In fact, Ms. Giovanelli and I were at something recently where we heard from other board members across the state that they don't have staff that does this. They don't have staff that revisits systematically job descriptions or policies or any of the things that you do for us. So I'm very grateful that you're updating our job descriptions to make them relevant to the year 2018 and making sure that the descriptions actually do what we need to be done for the district and the students. So thank you. Thank you.
And we continue to revise the process and get better at it each time we do the division work. And it's really good that Will is such a detailed person because he's really created some processes and procedures that are going to allow us to really move this work faster as we're learning the ups and downs. The next item for briefing is not necessarily a job study, but more of as we have evaluated several pieces of information. One is other organizational charts of other school districts, because that's always a part of this process as we do job studies to see how other divisions other districts are set up to provide services. In addition to a lot of the work that Dr. Atkins has been doing with the NAACP, efforts through our Minority Recruitment Committee, and all of those kind of pieces of information have brought us to a recommendation for creating an actual diversity and inclusion department. Which our recommendation to begin that would be just to have a director position, And then we, as part of that process, we did revise, at each of the schools, there's a supplemental position that's available to teachers to be the equity coordinator. And so we updated that. We thought that would go hand in hand with the recommendation for this particular position. And so what we're looking for, we did look at many, many districts and lots of different job descriptions and vetted it through a lot of different people to arrive at the job description that we're presenting to you today for a briefing, and are looking forward to on February 27th to move that forward for approval. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if Dr. Atkins wanted to comment.
I think that this is a position in the department I think that we really have a significant need for in the school district for a number of reasons. One of the things that I think is important is if you think about our students for a minute, I think although we have made some tremendous progress in the area of student achievement, I think that one of the concerning things is if you look at our achievement gaps, those remain persistent. So if you look at some of our subgroups, you see that while everybody is rising, you still have the gaps that persist over the years. Now, there's been some areas where we've made some progress. For example, I'm very happy to see that this past year our graduation rate for African Americans closed significantly, as did our Hispanic students, but particularly African Americans this past year. But we also saw that gap in terms of graduation rate close with our other, like students with disabilities and students with poverty. So that's the good news. But on the if you look at it on a more broad perspective, that is certainly an area that we need to focus, and I think a lot of that comes with professional development and training that we are going to have to provide, and this office will be laser focused on those types of issues. In addition to that, I look forward to this office working hand in hand with professional standards and equity when you look at equity concerns that we have, and also providing training for our staff in that particular area. And then finally, we continue to work on ways to diversify our workforce, and that is something I think Dr. Pruitt and her team have done a yeoman's job of making improvements, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, and I think that this office can help facilitate that work. So there's many, many things that we feel there needs to be, for many, many reasons, there needs to be a larger emphasis placed here. And so I am happy to say that this was our idea from this district. This was as a part of our response to the NAACP's concern, which are concerns that we share with them as well. So I'm happy to say this is a collaborative effort, and I would certainly ask for your support in starting this office.
Board members, any questions or comments? Is that
I
Ms.
just think
Choiva?
with our demographics, and our community the way we are, I think we owe it. We have that responsibility to address the needs in our community, and I think this is a good place to do that. I've said very often that it starts in the Lee County school system. I think we have to go beyond the Lee County school system and go to all of Lee County and get all community leaders involved to fix Lee County, to make us the community that we need to be, and I think we're far from it. And so I appreciate the help of the NAACP. I also think we need to have the Horizon Council and all the other business communities join the Lee County school system. And I think us, by doing this, having this particular department, is a step in the right direction.
Ms. Giovanna?
I'm very supportive, as we've had that conversation, so I'm excited about the position, and I think it's a great direction that we're going in for the community, so I appreciate it.
Good. Sorry, Dr. Cockle.
Well, I'd like to see us reach out too, especially if we're going to work with our advisory committee, our diversity advisory committee, that we also make sure we talk a lot about the NAACP, but actually our majority minority group is the Hispanic group. And I'm hoping that we'll reach out and have equal representation on the advisory group that works with this position.
And we've been really fortunate on the minority recruitment committee to do that and to have equal representation, and we really are, have a great group this year, so we're excited.
So I have a couple of questions. The first is, I kind of got the feeling from reading this that whoever fills this position will be the staff member liaison to the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee. Is that a fair expectation?
We did not have that discussion. I think if anything, maybe it would be a dual effort, at least for the time being.
Okay. And then my other questions are really picky. On the second page of the job description, the fourth and fifth bullets from the bottom.
Can you wait 1 second so I can get there with
Yes,
you?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay, I'm with
They
you.
say promote compliance with equal employment and non-discrimination policies, and then promote diversity, community, and cultural outreach and intervention programs within the community. Why promote instead of ensure? I believe the word ensure is used, actually that very last bullet is ensure. So to me, if I'm applying for this job, promoting something and ensuring that it happen are two different levels of expectation. So I'm just wondering why.
We can certainly make that change.
Okay. All right, that was it. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
And next up, we have Mr. Mora, who will talk about change order memos for December and project status update for High School MMM and Bonita Springs High School.
Good afternoon, board members. It's with great pleasure that I round out today's agenda with an update of our major capital projects. I would like to begin with the change order report, and I'll be very brief because you have the report in front of you. You will note that we've returned $92,000 back from the 3 projects. Well, actually, there are 4 projects that are represented in that change order report for December. From Bonita Springs High School as a result of value engineering and DMP, as well as 3 re-roofing projects that our maintenance department is leading from Hurricane Irma damage. So we're really proud that we're able to return that money to the district, to the project via DMP, direct material purchase, as well as value engineering. Now, as far as our other major projects, Bonita Springs High School, as if you haven't noticed, it's a beehive of activity at the corner of Imperial and Shangri-La. We're really excited about the progress. We're on schedule for a July move-in. Lots of great things are happening at that school, and we look forward to having a really good grand opening at some point in the summer before school starts. MMM, East Zone High School, we're full swing in the pre-construction process. We are anticipating bringing back to you all a construction manager ranking on April 10th. And on the Lehigh Senior High School edition, we're looking at bringing 2 things forward to the board. It will be the architectural ranking on March 13th, followed by the construction manager 2 weeks later. We have already begun looking at Lehigh Senior High School in regards to their FF&E project, and that is equipping the addition that we're putting at the school. We're getting out in front of that. So we have some meetings scheduled this week to determine what exactly do we need to put in as far as furniture, fixtures, and equipment in that addition. MMM, we anticipate engaging with that architect this week and looking at the pre-construction process, particularly the design charrette and conceptual design process. So really excited about these 3 major projects that we have in the hopper, particularly because we need the capacity. Also in your report, you'll see that we have a variety of HVAC upgrades listed, as well as some kitchen remodels that we work with food services on. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present these updates to you, and I'll take any questions you might have on any of these projects.
Board members, questions, comments? We still on schedule for August opening of that school?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we're hoping to get substantial completion on all of the buildings in the month of July so we can begin the move-in process.
Great.
So just a couple comments. One, we are, when he talks about value engineering and returning dollars to the project, I mean, one of the things we will continue to work with the board on is, in terms of how we're going to expend those dollars, because there's certainly some academic advantages that we can exploit using those dollars. But right now, The team is doing an excellent job, I think, in terms of value engineering the project. And I think at the end of the day, you're ending up with a better building. I think one that you don't have a lot of redundant, overbuilt examples that we had before. So I think this is a really good process. The second thing I want to mention is from a curriculum perspective, some exciting things, and Mr. Estes continues to work on the curriculum for Bonita Springs High School as those students expand and move up through the program. We had a discussion just as recently as today about the Sustainability Academy, the Entrepreneurship and Sustainability Academy, and one of the challenges is, of course, making sure that these academies are marketable to our students and things that our students want to participate in. Some of you might have been at STEMtastic over the weekend, and you might have run into Jason Casey with his EV cars. I think Mr. Toiber's a part of that club, but we got to talk about the curriculum opportunities and academic opportunities that technology offers our students, and with Tesla potentially coming into Lee County, opening up a repair station, and with some of the things that FGCU has done and some of the things that are going on around the world, that we're not just talking about sustainability from an agricultural perspective, but also from an energy perspective. So solar, but also the advent of more technology in batteries and everything that goes along with it. It's pretty exciting. So as we look to continue to build the curriculum there at Bonita Springs High School, I think that's something that we can really offer our students that will be valuable moving forward. And having said that, we did have a good discussion in Cabinet recently about getting out ahead of the academic programs for MMM. So Dr. Creel is heading up that effort. Obviously, we'll be working with the operations team, but this time, we want academic services to be way out in front, and so they're already out there and working on our offerings there as well. So some exciting things as we move forward.
Chris?
Great. Oh, yes, sorry.
So you mentioned something that I had thought to bring up to you but have forgotten to. When I toured Bonita Springs High School, one of the things that was made really clear to me was that having the principal on site early and working with the construction team, and also knowing with the kids who are anticipating the move-in, what their interests were, was really critical to making some decisions about the design as they moved along without increasing costs. In fact, in some cases, decreasing costs. So I just wanted to throw out, how are we thinking in terms of administration as we move forward with these new schools? I mean, I realize it's premature for MMM, but I mean, is that the same game plan? Are we going to use the same game plan?
Mr. Moore, and you can correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think he and other members of our cabinet are actually pushing me to get an earlier date for the school principal.
Okay, great.
So that's the feedback I'm getting from them, and we're going to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, board members.
The next item is public comment. Does Mr. Martin, do you address that in a briefing meeting? Mr. Martin, please address.
School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on the briefing meeting agenda. The subject of comment is limited to the items on the agenda. The time allowed per speaker is 3 minutes.
Is there anybody on the right-hand side of the auditorium that wishes to address? We have 2. 3. Do I just call them up one at a time? Mr. Castellano?
I am Mark Castellano, President of the Teachers Association of Lee County. I'm going to start with your comments about Heidi Brennan. Heidi is awesome. That is a great way to explain it. She was here. She was ours. We loved her. She was on our executive board. She was a great building rep. She went to Tallahassee. We cried. She came back. We celebrated. We immediately put her back on the bargaining team. So you're right. She's an awesome addition back to the district, and we're very happy. So change of tone completely. I am mad as hell, and I'm tired of taking anymore, to paraphrase Howard Beale. The legislature has just gotten completely out of hand. They are ridiculous. I honestly believe this ever since November 8th, 2016. I'll leave it to your memories to realize what happened on that date. But I believe that it empowered certain elements of our society. And I think the privateers who want to kill off public education do feel totally empowered. Speaker Corcoran's actions last year were outrageous. Speaker Corcoran's actions this year are absolutely repulsive. To sit there and try and hold the legislature hostage for the funding of public education in this state, while he has a vetted personal interest in charter schools, and he continues to push charter schools through all of the legislation that he's put forward. 7055, I'm a little frustrated with Mr. Dodig right now. One of the components of 7055 that he failed to mention is that they put the decertification language into this huge train bill. They didn't think they were going to get the traction they need with HB 25 and Senate Bill 1036, the specific decertification bills. So he threw it in there just to make sure that if he threatened everybody, he could get that. Voter registration. I love this district. I love Dr. Atkins. Sometimes I get very frustrated because I feel like we are light years ahead of you guys in some respects. We have been pushing voter registration for years. Some of you sitting on this board benefited from that last year. So we will continue to do so. The 50th anniversary of the 1968 teacher walkout in the state of Florida. Anybody in here aware of that? Next Monday is the 50th anniversary. We have asked teachers on Wednesday, since most people aren't in school Monday and Tuesday, to wear black to commemorate that day. And I would hope that somebody here will agree to make some statement about that and the results that came.
Mr. Fazzone?
Dr. Kerfazone, Island Coast FEA Director. I would just follow up on a couple of things that Mark said about these bills. House Bill 25, this bill comes every year. This is the decertification bill for public sector unions. They've carved out police and firefighters this year. And Senator Plakin, who's the sponsor of the bill, said, well, the state has an interest in labor peace when it involves police and firefighters. Our teachers and support staff stand on the front lines every day. If the state does not have an interest in labor peace when it comes to educators and ESPs, their priorities are way off in left field. Senate Bill 1036 is the companion this year. It has not moved in the Senate yet. It has a couple of committee stops. We're hoping that it stopped at the first committee by Senator Monfort, who has no appetite for this. But that's one that's on our radar. The companion 1036 came well before it did last year. And so like I said, it's on our radar. But House Bill 7055, like Mark said, this is an attack on public sector unions. And in this case, they carved out everybody except for the labor organizations that represent instructional personnel. So that would be TALC and, I don't know, maybe a part of SPALC. SPALC represents paraprofessionals, they're instructional, but how those numbers would be kept and reported, we have no idea. You all know the impact that Best and Brightest has had on Mr. Rothenberg and Mr. Gatewood in HR. I can imagine that this is another unfunded mandate that you all would have to manage the reporting for and report to PERC every year, whether TALC or SPALC falls below that 50% density mark. But I'll just remark, SPALC and TALC are partners in helping Lee County be the world-class school system that it is. We're not adversaries. And I know you all believe that. I've worked in a lot of districts across the state. This is the only one that I've seen with the relationship that you all have with the union and management. The collaborative relationship works. Not only do teachers and our staff reap the benefits, but the students do as well. Because as you said, Chris, teachers and ESPs see these workplace safety issues well before they're reported to management a lot of times. So, we're just asking that you stand with us. We have to be vigilant with 7055. We are a partner in the success of the school district with you, so we ask that you stand with us and speak out publicly against 7055. Thank you.
Great, Ms. Mitchell? And Kerr, I'm sorry I didn't call you Dr. Fazone.
Co-president of SPELC, I'm going to cite some figures from the Florida Department of Revenue on property. Property values in Florida in 2008 were $2.6 trillion. Property values in 2010 were $1.9 trillion. Property values in Florida were in 2017 were $2.6 trillion, back to prior to the recession. Required local effort based on property values in 2007-8 were $7.9 billion, based on the third calculation of the FEFP of 2007-8. 2009-2010, $7.8 billion, third calculation again. 2017-2018, $7.6 billion, third calculation again. $300 million behind where we were prior to the recession. Base student allocations, 07-08 were $4,135, 17-18, $4,204, 124 or 3% more than before the recession. Total unweighted funds per students, 07-08, 7,127, 17-18, 7,307, 180 or 2.5% more than before recession. According to the Social Security Administration, the actual increases in cost of living adjustments each year for the last 10 years totaled 16.6 for retirees living on a fixed income. I think the school district has been on a fixed income. Average teacher pay in Florida in 07-08 was $46,922. 14-15 was $48,179. As reported last year by DOE, an increase of $1,241 or 2.6%. So school districts have been living on a fixed income, and when people come and say, oh, you have enough money, they don't have the facts.
Okay, the next item is board member comments. Start with Ms. Fisher.
I have no comments today, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli.
I enjoyed being in Tallahassee. I actually sat through the debate for 7055. That lasted probably an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. Very long. I think almost everybody had a debate and watched the outcome. We have our work cut out for us. So it was interesting though, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. That's all I have, really.
Mr. Toiber.
I was at the STEM event this Saturday, and I have to say it was amazing as always. I appreciate the foundation for being there. All of our teachers, people from all the schools. I mean, everybody had something different, something exciting for the kids. If I had $1 for every time I heard a kid say, I really am enjoying it here, we wouldn't have a funding issue, because it was, every student was really engaged and enjoying what they were doing, and some of the things at some of our schools was just amazing. So that's all I have. Oh, and one more thing, I guess. Just back to our tax initiative and what Ms. Fisher said, I spoke at one of our schools, and it is amazing to see the looks on our educators' faces when we tell them the information. And they are not alone as a single group, but they are the ones that we are now trying to get through our SACs and our DACs. Our parents are the same. Everybody, and I have to admit, before I came involved in the school system, I was probably just as ignorant of the facts of running our school system. People have no idea the situation that we're in. And I really believe that we need to continue to get out there as much as possible to anybody that will hear us. And as Dr. Atkins says, just tell our story. You know, our story, unrefuted facts, it makes our story a winner. And people just need to know about it and know what situation we're in. So,
Dr. Cockle?
Our story is compelling, and it will be as we get it out. I just want to follow up with the science fair, some data for everybody. There were 321 projects, 374 student participants, up from 2017, which had 298, from 53 secondary campuses registered to compete in the science fair. Inventors Fair, 220 K-12, and 176 were judged for participation rate of 85% of those that registered. Over $100,000 in scholarships were awarded in the science fair, and $95,000 in scholarships in the Inventors Fair. 26 projects with 33 students will represent our regional science fair at the state science fair in March. Over a 5-year historical span, the Gowanus Science and Engineering Fair participants from Southwest Florida have averaged a 76% recognition rate at the state science fair. 148 student participants receiving 113 student awards. 5 individual projects, 3 from Canterbury and 2 from Fort Myers High School, were selected for advancement to the International Science Fair in May in Pittsburgh. Trafalgar Middle School is a recipient of our 2018 Edison Cup for secondary schools. They had a very strong showing across science and Inventors Fair. Wow. Just a little data.
Woo-hoo.
Great, thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I already commented about the curriculum advisory. My comment about the meeting in Tallahassee is it's clear from talking to individual board members as we sort of walked around and did our thing, that because we have a new lobbyist, there's some confusion about who's doing what roles each individual board members have vis-a-vis Carol Green. So I'm just going to ask that if you're going to meet with a legislator, please do it through Carol Green. That way she knows who's meeting with what legislator about what. She may not be able to attend every meeting, but I think from the point of view of understanding what we are trying to accomplish as a team, we need to have a common point, and I think that should be Mrs. Green. And of course, Chris is doing it from our side, but I think that when it comes to working with people up in Tallahassee, we need to work through Carol. So.
Right.
Yeah, and I have a good of the order later, so.
Okay. I wanted to comment to Mark and Kerr and Jamie. I'm sorry I said your last name. To me, you're just Jamie. I couldn't remember your last name, so I'm sorry. I told you this on the phone, Kerr. When I was in New York, they were building a new NYSUT building. NYSUT is New York State United Teachers. It was the teachers union in New York. And the building was unbelievably gorgeous. It was marble floors and wrought iron gates and fences, and it was really just beautiful. I remember walking in there and thinking, wow. It was big-time money associated with that union. And then I met with you, Mark, and Donna Mutzenard when I was campaigning, and I met in a converted garage with folded chairs, and the vinyl padding on the chairs is ripped. And it was a huge eye-opener for me. You guys clearly are not in this for the money or for the fame or for the fortune or any of that. And I do firmly believe that you represent the collective voice of our employees. Kerr, you just said it really well. There are things that occur in our buildings that we can't know about down here, downtown. We as school board members can't know about, and you can't necessarily know about it either. So yes, I'm very appreciative of the relationship that we have, and we have talked, and we will continue to work together. So I wanted to put that out there. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to say. This has been a really hard time for me as a board member. This has been one of the most difficult times for me on the board. I would say the next most difficult time was when I toured the jail, the juvenile. That was like emotionally difficult to see that that's what kids have to do. But this has been kind of like a roller coaster these past several weeks with the sales tax, and then with fighting the legislature, and with coming to terms with the county commission, and our staff has worked so hard. They have worked so hard, and I just need to encourage them to, they can't work during the school day in order to get information out about this, and a lot of them have taken their own personal time to go out into the community and to share information that's necessary, and it is a brief period of time. November seems like a long time away, but it will be here before we know it, and I just want you guys to know that I'm so grateful. There are times when I just feel like beating my head up against the wall and being like, really? But failure is not an option here. And I believe the best way to predict the future is to create it ourselves. And I think that that's what we're doing here. We are creating the funding necessary for the future of our children. So we're not just waiting to see what happens. We're actually taking control and doing it ourselves. So thank you, staff, for everything that you're doing. I appreciate it. The next item is board attorney comment. Mr. Martin?
Yes, Mr. Trika, board members, I do have a school law minute, and we've been discussing parliamentary procedure, and the subject I wanted to address today is delaying action of the school board. If you do wish to delay action indefinitely, the parliamentary tool to use for that purpose is a motion to table. A motion to table requires a second majority vote. It is not debatable. When presenting a motion to table, you can explain the reason for doing so, and the chair can ask the maker to state the reason for the motion to table, but there's no subsequent discussion. The item that is actually tabled is the motion rather than the recommendation. So the process is the superintendent makes a recommendation, there's a motion to approve, a second, and then a motion to table. The item tabled, again, is the motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation, not the recommendation itself. With the motion to table, there is no set time for taking up the matter again. If the motion to table passes, the motion tabled with the name of the maker and the member who provided the second is listed under tabled items, the tabled items section of all regular meeting agendas until it is taken from the table and acted on. Items tabled at a regular meeting can only be removed and acted on at a regular, not a special meeting. In order to deal with the motion that's previously been tabled, the item must first be taken from the table. The form of that motion is, I move to take from the table the motion to fill in the blank. If that motion requires a second, again, that is not debatable, it requires a majority vote. And if the motion removed from the table passes, that motion then returns to the floor in the same format that it was in when it was made, with the motion and the second already in place. That's all I have today.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Atkins.
Just one comment relative to our bargaining unit. I think all of them were very articulate in talking about our relationship and the interest-based process that we use. A number of years ago, it's over a decade at this point, I think back in 2005, I had the pleasure to attend I'll call it an international conference, but in reality it's Canada and the United States, so, not all that international, but it was a National Association of Educational Negotiators, or North American Association of Educational Negotiators, and one of the things was a presentation by Cornell University that was talking about interest-based bargaining and the research they had done around interest-based bargaining. And you've heard me say it before, but it's worth saying again for those of you who may not have been around to hear it. But the research that Cornell demonstrated was that bargaining agreements that are reached through this process are way more durable and often more innovative than what you will see in other more combative environments. And in addition to that, they're cost neutral. So some people have the perception that interest-based is a more costly process. It is not. It is actually cost neutral, and the agreements that are reached are again more innovative and more durable. And I think what you've seen here in our school district with a number of different things, working through in and out of the recession, through good times and through bad times. And I can tell you that when there's a lot of dollars and resources out there, those are sometimes the most difficult bargaining session to have. We have been able to do some very innovative things from the career ladder, and Dr. Pruitt and her team are continuing to do some really, really cutting edge things with the partnership with the union. So I think this is very, very important. The frustrating thing for for me as a former negotiator and then sitting in this chair is that we all know that the teachers in the classroom is really what drives this institution, as well as our principals. But teachers in the classroom, we are being stripped of our ability to bargain collectively with our bargaining units. 447 is law, and this is an attempt, in many cases, Best and Brightest and 755 and things like this are attempt to circumvent what is in law that works. And what happens is Tallahassee solutions, like many Tallahassee solutions, simply do not work. And so if the state of Florida wants to join and be a global force in education, it cannot be handcuffed by these crazy requirements that come out of people who really don't understand education. And instead, we as a profession collectively need to stand up and take our profession back, because we know what we need best locally, and as an educational profession, we know what's best for our students in the classroom, and therefore should be treated like a profession. This is simply that we are not being treated that way, and I would say that the way that we bargain in the school district of Lee County is something that I would hold up against just about anyone in the entire world. In fact, honestly, we had some folks from Africa that were very interested in our model a couple years ago. But anyway, so I concur with their statements, and I would hate to see anything that would come in between this school district and the great relationship that it has with its employee groups. And that's all my comments.
Jamie, I forgot to ask, can you send us that data, please,
Yes,
that
thank
you
you.
read today? All right, and good of the order? Any items for good of the order?
Yes, I have one. Mrs. Giovanelli has circulated a memo, the request of the superintendent that there be an investigation based on a whistleblower allegation. And I guess my first question is, Dr. Adkins, I would presume, but maybe I'm wrong, that that's going to take more than an hour and a half of staff work, which is what our protocol says an individual board member may request.
That would be correct, yes. I checked with Lauren today.
Okay. Then the second question I have of the board is that if an investigation is, how does the board wish to proceed? Because if an investigation is requested, that's not a function of the board. That would be the function of an outside individual brought in to do an investigation. We don't investigate ourselves. Historically, that's been the case. Yes, Dr. Atkins.
Well, the first step would be, and as I understand it, and Mr. Martin can certainly correct me, but first you would bring that to the superintendent in
Correct.
terms of who that person would be, so that we can start that investigation ourselves. As I understand, we have a whistleblower in this, and as I understand that piece of law, that is information that would come to us first, so that we could thoroughly investigate that matter expeditiously. So I think as a first step, I would need to know, as a superintendent, the person that is making these allegations, so they can certainly be investigated.
Okay, so you're looking for direction from the board to take no action until you know who the whistleblower is and have an opportunity to discuss with the whistleblower what the allegations actually are.
Correct.
Mr. Martin.
Yes, as I understand, I believe Ms. Giovanelli's request is twofold. The first is with respect to investigation, which, as Dr.
Right.
Atkins has appropriately addressed, if there are allegations of misconduct by an employee of the school district, it's the responsibility of the superintendent to investigate such allegations and bring a recommendation for the school board to the school board for action if there's a need to do so. So to the extent a board member has any information concerning allegations of misconduct by a staff member, that should be shared with the superintendent for him to perform that duty. And then I understand that there's a separate request for particular documents, and that's where the 1.5 hour standard applies in the protocol. So I think there are two different issues there to be dealt with, and really it's only the second one that the board would address. The first is just a matter of that information needs to go to the superintendent.
Okay, so Mrs. Giovanelli, you have your direction on that. And then with respect to the documentation, the question, does the board support a request for the documentation and the timeline as requested in the email? Does the board want staff to spend that time on that and to meet the deadline stipulated in the memo?
I would like to hear from Ms. Giovanelli, know what she wants and why the timeline, why the specific timeline, and what do you need?
Well, I actually was curious if it was going to be over the 1.5 hours. I think that was one answer I was waiting for. Second, that I felt that the information, once the information was provided, that would clear everything up.
Okay, again, that's kind of a vague answer. I don't have the memo in front of me. Can you tell me what you want, why you want it, and when you want it, and why you want it? I mean, if you're a board member, then should we all want it? Explain to me why. What can I don't want cloak and dagger. I don't want to try to read a memo. What are you asking for, and why do you want it? And tell this board what's going on.
The information that I was given was that things were done that weren't done per the protocol for FEMA to reimburse us. I asked what that information was. I wasn't given that information, so that's why I felt that I needed to ask the board and Dr. Atkins what is it we're still waiting on to see if we're going to get paid for, and what that's going to be, and what the timeline is of that, and what was actually not done to protocol, because I don't know that information.
Who did you ask for this information?
This information was given to me by someone that I, at this point, I cannot give that out.
It's my understanding that you would need to, so we can investigate that.
You said things were done. Can you define those things so that we can maybe pin it down?
They weren't done per protocol, whatever that is from the hurricane. I don't know, really.
What things?
I don't know if cleaning up the debris without permission, or what FEMA, I don't know what FEMA is not going to pay. That's what I was told, that FEMA will not be reimbursing us most of that $22 million. So I'm like, really? So.
Is that a conversation that you've had with Dr. Atkins? Did you ask him that question?
No, that's why I sent the email. Because I was given this information a week ago before I left town, and I was worried about not bringing that to the board and Dr. Atkins, knowing that. And this person wants to be a whistleblower.
Do I recall correctly that we acted so quickly in our debris cleanup that we, in fact, will not be reimbursed for some of that? Wasn't it like that first week, or maybe I'm confusing us with Bonita Springs? Didn't we act so quickly that the Fed said we're not going to reimburse some of that? Am I wrong? No?
Not that I'm
It must be Bonita Springs that I'm confusing it with.
I was thinking the same thing.
I personally, just as a fellow board member, would want you to have a conversation with the superintendent and see if you can get there with regard to that.
She's got an answer.
Before we approve using staff time, especially given how taxed they are right now.
Clarification. So what it is the state had a time frame where you only get a percentage if you go in and do a debris cleanup at a certain time, and then it was like if you went in 3 weeks later and cleaned up, you got 100%. We couldn't wait for 3 weeks. We needed to get in. We needed to clean the schools up. We need to reopen them. So we will not be collecting at 100% for that debris cleanup time period, but it isn't because anybody did anything wrong. It's because we were proactive to get our schools back open. I did ask FEMA if they could make any change in that for us for school districts, because we're not like a regular county government thing where school districts, we got to get kids back in a routine. And they said that is the governor made that call, and so they couldn't change that. So I think that's where the amounts are off, where people may have thought that we did something wrong, but we did everything right for our students to get schools back open.
I guess the comment I'd like to make is that, an email has gone out. It's been shared with the press. The press has called and asked for us to comment. I don't understand why a question wasn't asked of the superintendent in the regular board member superintendent meeting. So that's the question I would like Mrs. Giovanelli to answer.
Well, I hadn't had a meeting with them from the time that I was given the information, and I felt like that the information needed to be sent in immediately and expedited if there in fact was something not handled properly. So you're saying I should wait? I'm under the impression that once you find out something that's pertinent, you're supposed to, not keep it a secret, and that's what I was doing.
No, but you would maybe vet the veracity of it and the underlying, whether there's an underlying
The
fact
person
basis for
that
it.
told me this has no reason to make up something and lie.
Well, I guess my point is that, and I hope the board will agree, that if it's critical, you've got to pick up the phone and call the superintendent. You've got to ask questions, just not take as face value something somebody tells you. We all know that. And then if you're not happy with the superintendent's response, you feel that there's a lack of transparency, then by all means go for it. But this has been treated as a thing where there's a need for transparency, and we don't even know what the problem is, but we've already involved.
I felt like if the information was provided, I think that would resolve everything. That's what I felt.
Okay.
And I still have no idea what you're talking about. Well, even though we've had the conversation, I still have no idea what you're talking about, so.
Right. What are the specifics?
The specifics was in my email asking for the information, so I thought the information, once it's given to everyone, it would resolve everything.
All right, let's look for consensus. Do we want staff to pursue this?
No.
Okay. Yes, no?
No, I think a conversation needs to be had with the superintendent first.
I don't think he's any more clear than we are.
About what it is.
Well, then I will talk with him and.
And I don't know if we have this particular type of an issue addressed in our protocols, but, perhaps we should.
Well, it is. If you ask for more documentation that requires more than an hour and a half of staff time, and the superintendent is uncertain whether or not that information is critical to the operation of the district, this board chair of the superintendent can ask, does the board wish to use staff time this way?
Right.
So then the first thing is to have the conversation in
Right.
an individual board member meeting with the superintendent
Okay.
first, and then,
Dr. Atkins?
and then if it's not resolved.
Okay.
And then I would ask any of you, if you have something of this nature, I think this should go without saying that you would contact me. You all have my cell phone number. You can text me. I've given you my wife's number, so you can contact her. Anytime during normal work days, there's 3 or 4 numbers that you can contact me here in the office. That is by far the fastest way. We all know that the email system, because I get so many emails in the course of a day, that's something that has to go through, a process to be delivered to me and brought to my attention. So any type you have a request of that nature that is that critical, by all means, pick up the phone and we will jump right on it.
So Mrs. Giovanelli gets the Velvet Elvis?
No, it's the ugly cookie jar.
Oh, the ugly cookie jar. Okay, all right.
Okay, and I will end by saying that I refuse to put Teresa's telephone number in my phone. I just couldn't do it. I understand why you offered it, and we're very appreciative of the fact that you're willing to be available at all times, but I just couldn't do it. Anything else we go to the order? Seeing nothing else, I think we have a student performance tonight at 5:45 and an action meeting of the board that will begin promptly at 6 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.